I think neurodivergent individuals can suffer from chronic stress more than neurotypical people. To mask their weaknesses, they're working really hard, and that can lead to burnout or long-term stress. So I think it's really interesting, and 10 to 20% of the population are neurodivergent in some way, and that can increase in industries like accountancy and tech. And especially if you're in your early careers, you're more vulnerable, you're younger, it's your first experience of the corporate world. I think we need to really support those people that might be struggling with all the various pressures.
I think one of the key things and one of the best pieces of advice, I think it's the best piece of advice, but I'd maybe just say to speak up, to kind of, it helps speaking to other people, and that's when you can kind of realise, oh, actually maybe it is burnout, maybe I am overwhelmed. But I think it's kind of speaking up to those who are closest to you, because then you can get that kind of support if you need it. But then even in the workplace, speaking up there, I'm very often the person who will say yes to everything, and then I'll step back and think, yeah, I really shouldn't have said yes to everything, there's just too much now. But I think if you can just speak up and just communicate with other people and just let them know everything that's on your plate, I think people usually are quite reasonable, and I've found that actually then you can get extra help. It's not that everything is on you, even though you think it might be.
The stories of some of my peers having like their personal relationships like almost permanently damaged because of experiencing this, that sort of scared me a bit.
Hello, I'm Hannah, and I'm the founder of Accountancy Hub. I'm also an ICAW Chartered Accountant, and I'm an inclusion consultant.
Hi, I'm Jag Daluel. I'm a Chartered Accountant and I qualified in 2022.
My name is Bobby. I was a chartered accountant in the city for about 4 years.
Yeah, definitely. I think the first few years of working in professional services is really tough, because you're studying and working full time, and you're under quite a lot of pressure from work, taking on more responsibility. Also, you're just new to the corporate world, which can be challenging. So there are pressures and stresses, and I think particularly when I was studying, I found some of the exams really challenging. And I was actually late diagnosed with dyslexia right at the end of my qualification journey. So I used a lot of my annual leave to study, and I basically just did a lot of working. So yeah, it can be a really stressful time, particularly when you're in your early careers.
So I wouldn't put it down to kind of just based on my job alone. I think it always comes down to other factors as well, so other things in my personal life, other things I kind of want to achieve outside of work, and I do just put a lot of pressure on myself, in particular at work. Probably I think when I was working and studying, I can remember one time where it was quite busy and pressured at that time, and you obviously have a lot of pressure with the exams then as well. So I think potentially at that time was probably more difficult, and then even recently I've just had quite a difficult period as well.
The problem with chronic stress is that it seeps into all parts of your life, and one part that impacted me was my social side. Normally I see my friends a lot, especially at evenings and weekends, but when you've got a busy work schedule, you sort of say no to those things, and it really impacts you that way. When you're a junior in the city, you really want to impress your colleagues and your bosses. So you keep saying yes to all the work, but then you realise you've got far too much on your plate, and then you're juggling all that and trying to still be alive outside of work, and it just ends up almost being unmanageable.
It is probably built around stress. When you've had kind of a stressful period, you've had a lot on your plate, so much to do, you feel like you're juggling a million things and you just can't do them all, and then something has to give, and by the end of it you are just tired.
So definitely mentally, I felt very tired, and looking back, I didn't think it was burnout at the time, but I started to have physical symptoms. So I was getting ill quite a lot. I think when you're under a lot of pressure, your immune system weakens a bit. So there were times when I would have like a week off work for a cold, which I would say, isn't that normal for me. So yeah, I think it's interesting when you're in prolonged periods of stress, sometimes it's those physical symptoms that show up before you actually realise what it is.
So when work gets so busy that you don't have time for yourself or your friends and family, I think you almost trick yourself and say, oh, it's fine, it's only a few more weeks, it's only a couple more months. But those things, they do damage relationships, don't they?
No. I just got on with it, which I think is really bad advice. Don't do that. Speak to friends and family, speak to colleagues, speak to your people manager. I think there needs to be better training for people managers so that they understand the signs and the symptoms in the people that they're managing. So yeah, I think I really did just carry on, which is not something you should do.
I think something that's actually really helped me recently, and this year I've started, is journaling. I'm not sure if that's something that they can use to then help them with burnout, but I think it's probably a good place to start, to kind of sit down with yourself and just recognise everything that you've got going on. You can be completely honest about your feelings. It suits you just speaking to yourself. There are journal prompts and things that can probably help as well, but I think kind of journaling, sitting down with yourself, I think just taking the time to kind of breathe, it's just resetting. And I think just things like that, I think just kind of clearing your head, going for walks, even trying to meditate. I do want to do more of that myself, but I think those kind of things should hopefully initially help. And then once you do have a bit of a clearer head, I think that's when you can start to kind of take steps forward.
During the year-end periods, a lot of people were eating really badly, not sleeping properly, not keeping active, not seeing their friends and family. In a weird way, we all sort of trauma bonded over that, but it shouldn't be that way. And I understand there are some short periods where you're under stress, but when it's protracted for a few months, that's a large part of the year where you're under the cosh. I've seen some of my friends who work in accountancy, it's impacted their personal relationships, some of them permanently, where they've had a long-term partner and they parted ways because the burnouts meant that they've not been able to give their selves or full selves to their partner. So clearly see the negative impacts of long periods of protracted stress.
I would say speak to your people manager, speak to your family and friends, reach out to CABA, who can support you in all sorts of ways, and just explain what's going on. And lots of people can make small adjustments that will help you and allow you to kind of have a bit of a recovery period. So definitely just don't suffer in silence.
Maybe first just let it out. I think just go with it, and then speak to people, speak to your support network, maybe speak to people at work, see how they can help. There are then also other organisations that can help, such as CABA. So CABA works closely with ICAEW, and so in particular chartered accountants can get the support from them, and I think that would be a really good place to start if it is work related.
So if you're feeling overwhelmed at work, I would say firstly talk to people. So your colleagues are your immediate source of contact, but then your friends and family are always there. But there are also organisations like CABA that have got so much experience in dealing with people who've had stressful times at work. So there's so much out there for you.